This is for questions 25 through 27, reading graphs. So you're going to use these different graphs to try to help us with the question. So it says, a forest has lots of plants and other organisms, including deer. Flowing through the middle of the forest, a creek. Most of the trees, grass, and flowers get their water from the creek, and all the deer in the forest drink out of the creek. One year there was very little rain or snowfall, and all the creek dried up. Which graph represents the relationship between the deer and the creek? Restate and explain with capital letters and punctuation. So I'm going to go ahead and start restating just so I can get that out of the way. So I would say the graph that best represents the relationship between the deer and creek is, and so if I'm trying to figure out which graph it is, well, if I'm looking at my graphs, I see population, so that would be biotic, and I see, if I'm also looking, I see we've got creek, which is abiotic, so I'm just going to put population, so I know what I'm looking for, and this would be abiotic. So I know what I'm looking for. So if I'm looking at this, population abiotic, I know it can't be graph B because it's population. So I'm just going to kind of cross that out. You can mark it on yours if you want, but it's not this. It's not going to be graph C because that's two populations. Graph D could be. Graph E could not be because that's two populations. Graph F maybe, and then G is none of the above. So if I'm talking about, we know that the deer in the creek, so it says that the deer drink from the creek. So if the creek all of a sudden started to dry up, then we know that then the population of deer would end up decreasing. So we know that deer drink from the creek, so if the creek dried up, then we wouldn't have very many deer. So if I'm looking at graph A, this kind of shows them both going up, down, up, then down, decrease. Well, it says that everything was fine until 1 year, so it can't be A. Let's look at graph D. Okay, so abiotic would be my water, population would be my deer. So everything's fine, and then all of a sudden the water dries up. Okay, maybe. Let's look at graph F. Okay, population would be increasing, abiotic would be the water. If the water isn't increasing, it's decreasing, so it can't be F. So my correct answer is D. So I'm going to write is graph D. And I have to explain why it is. So we could say the creek drying up. So the creek drying up, that would be decreasing. Will cause the deer population to decrease. I'm going to say because deer drink water from the creek. And then you need to go ahead and do the rest. Make sure that you're explaining, like I did, like why those are connected. Don't just say they increase, decrease. You've got to say how they're connected.